So the water cycle is basically the Earth's way of not only moving water around on the planet, but it's also a way of purifying water, okay? Because when water goes through the water cycle, it actually gets purified. And I know what you're thinking, but what about acid rain? Acid rain has nothing to do with the water cycle per se. Okay, well, why don't we do the water cycle first, and then we'll talk about how water then gets polluted. Okay, so first we start off, if we've got water bodies on the earth, let's say this is a lake. Okay, and then we've got, let's say, some vegetation here. Draw a nice tree. Draw some plants. Okay. Another tree. There. So this is my area. Okay? Now, what ends up happening on the planet is that the sun's rays make the surface of the earth warm. They heat it up. Okay? And that heat comes down and it causes something to occur with the water on the planet. What does it cause to occur? When liquid water is heated, what is that process called?
Not the water cycle.
Okay, so what it ends up doing here is these little bits of water, okay, these little gas particles of water rise up from surface water on the planet. And that process is called evaporation. And evaporation is taking liquid water on the surface, heating it up and forming gaseous water or water vapor. Okay? As that water vapor rises, what happens to the temperature in the atmosphere? It gets colder. And when we remove heat from water vapor, we end up getting the formation of clouds because this water vapor turns back into little drops of water inside, and they basically attach to little dust particles and what have you, and they form clouds. And that process of going from gaseous back to liquid is known as what? Condensation. Now, it's important to note that all living organisms on the planet produce body heat. Okay, whether you're a tree or an animal, you're producing some form of heat and you're losing water that way. So that also gets added. Now, plants need carbon dioxide to make their food. Okay? They get carbon dioxide from the air around them. But what they have to do is the leafy part of the plant, or the green part of the plant, has to open up the underside. It's got these little openings on the underside of its leaves, and it has to open them up during the day to suck in some carbon dioxide. When it does that, though, especially if it's really hot, it loses precious water. And that water escapes in the form of water vapor. That water vapor also basically rises and adds to the actual amount of cloud cover or moisture in clouds. What is the process of losing water from plants called? Transpiration, exactly. So that's all great. What happens to the clouds when they are saturated or full? What has to happen?
Has to rain.
It has to precipitate. Not always in the form of rain. Okay? But the idea of that trapped moisture in those clouds has to come back down to the surface of the earth. Now, the interesting thing here, okay, is that when these particles of water vapor get absorbed, you could have muck and mud and pollutants. You could have some of that stuff in this lake. But when evaporation actually occurs, It is pure H2O, okay? Pure water that gets absorbed. None of the pollutants get absorbed. You can try this little experiment at home where if you put some sugar in a glass and you put a little bit of water in that glass, put that glass on top of a heater, okay, or like some kind of heat source, and leave it alone for a while. When you come back and all the water is gone, you will see that the sugar bits are down at the bottom, and they might not look like crystals, but that is the dissolved sugar. It did not get absorbed with the water because or evaporated, sorry, because in evaporation, it's only water molecules that go up. So all that pollution and any other stuff stays on the ground where it is. Okay? So this is pure water up here. And when that actually starts to fall, all right, and hit the ground, okay, when that actually starts to fall and hit the ground, it's going to be called precipitation. Now, it could come in the form of rain. It could come in the form of snow. Okay, it could come in the form of sleet, hail, you name it. Anything it's ice pellets. Okay, it's a mixture of snow and ice and water. Okay, it could be freezing rain. It could be a variety of things. But the idea is that precipitation falls back down to the surface. Now, where acid rain comes in is the idea that there is some atmospheric pollution in the air, okay, especially in very urban areas. And that water, as it's falling through this atmospheric pollution, those little molecules of sulfur dioxide and nitrous oxide, okay, these two gases that are produced by factories, they latch onto water and they make the water more acidic. Okay, and that's where acid rain comes from. Now, not all rain is acid rain, not all of it. Okay, but what ends up happening here is when the precipitation hits the surface of the earth, two things can happen. There's two options here for the water cycle. If it pours buckets and it's raining or it's snowing or it's doing whatever so much more quickly than the earth can absorb it, that water is going to run off. It's going to follow gravity. It's going to follow any inclination or inclined plane, and it's going to run along the surface of the earth. And it will run into whatever crevice, crack, water deposit, sewer that it can find. Okay? And we call that surface runoff when it actually runs down on the top of the ground. The other option is that it can actually make its way into the soil. Okay? It can actually go into the soil, and what is that actually called?
I'm not sure, it's infiltration.
Infiltration. Okay, so the idea that moisture makes its way into the soil for the plants and the roots and all these things, that is called infiltration. It is infiltrating or entering the soil. Now, once in the soil, it can do two things. It can become part of what we call the water table, okay, which is this place underground, okay, that below which is saturated with water. We get a lot of our water through groundwater, okay, and that line that separates groundwater from just rock is called the water table. As it goes down into the actual groundwater, past the water table, that is the process of percolation. So when that water actually, whether it's on surface runoff or whether it's under the ground, it will then make its way back to being absorbed, condensed, precipitated, all to run off or be infiltrated again. And that is the water cycle.